Well, good morning, everyone who's here in the US, and good afternoon to everyone from the UK who's joining us. We have a guest from the UK today, which is very exciting to me. Today, we are going to be talking to Adelle Martin. She is an executive midlife coach. She does coaching for women who really have one of the toughest things that they need to deal with in life, which is dealing with menopause. So Adelle started her executive midlife coaching business after she left a really long and it sounds like successful corporate career, working in financial services and as an HR professional. Alongside that, she ran a small family business, volunteered in women-based charities, and she's also a mom to a wonderful daughter, which is fabulous. And really, this is going to be great information for you to have to be able to share with your daughter at some point too. On top of that, because that's not enough, she completed her MBA, qualified as an executive coach, is a personal trainer, a nutrition coach, a marathon runner, a dancer, and an amateur physique bodybuilder, which that's a whole conversation for another day. Well, hi, Sandy. Good morning. At 40, when she was told to quit her job to manage her health, you'd think she'd power through. She knew something was wrong. Can you imagine being asked to leave your job because you're going through menopause? Thank goodness you thought more of that, Adelle, and said, I've got to figure this out. So now she's an executive coach for women, midlife leaders, as well as a go-to resource for media and corporations on menopause. So Adelle, good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning and good afternoon here in the UK when we have a wonderful bank holiday for Easter. So it's a pleasure to be here this morning and this afternoon.
Right, it is afternoon, to keep that in mind. Well, good afternoon. And hi to Sandy, thank you for joining us today.
Hi.
And if you are here joining us, please say a quick hello. We'd love to hear that you're here. We'd love to hear your questions, your comments, your thoughts. So Adelle, what a thing to have someone say to you that you need to leave your high-powered job because you're going through menopause. From what I understand, and this is really the link, there's such a huge link between hormones and mental health and menopause and mental health and women's functioning. So tell us about that, about you being asked to leave your job.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it started, it's always, I remember it so vividly. So it was just before we went into the financial crisis here in the UK. And it was in the August, and I was asked to take over a corporate finance. Now, who takes over corporate finance just before a financial crisis? I do. And I did. And I did. But actually, I'd worked really hard. I just finished my MBA. I was in the leadership program, and my daughter was at an age where I could do that. And for the first time in my life, I thought, yeah, I'm here. And I have been in a very male-dominated world, very male. So I've had to work extremely hard to get into that boardroom. Absolutely fine. And 2 months later, the pressure was on in a good way, but I was working long hours. And then what happened is we had to take over another bank. So I was starting to get involved in what would have been hostile territory. But the thing is, though, none of that fazed me. I've always had to fight really, really hard. But what I couldn't really understand is I was getting more darker moments where I felt very uncomfortable. Although when I was in the boardroom, I would never, ever let on that perhaps I was losing my confidence, perhaps that I felt like I was forgetting the next sentence, or I felt like I was reading from a script. And then what made that worse is then people in the room were going, don't you even understand what you're saying? It feels like you can't. What's going on? You can't string a sentence together. We thought you were the one with all this track record. And the thing is, I'm going, yeah, but I am. But that's not how I feel. And in that environment and in that pressure, I couldn't even put into words how I would feel. And then when I was on my own and I was at home and the children had gone to bed, I just sit in the chair going, am I losing my mind? Am I not confident? Perhaps I should have taken this job. Why do I feel so tired? And all of those things that I would just kept questioning myself. And then what happened is I was creating that this vicious circle of not very nice self-talk. And what was happening is day after day, that self-talk was going, you're not good enough, you're not going to be able to do this. And then I was then started to have trouble sleeping at night, and then the tiredness, then the fatigue. But I just kept going because it was that environment where nobody had time to ask, are you okay, or where you were. And I was in hostile territory, and I just kept going and going, despite feeling I am really, really struggling. And then one day I was just in a particular meeting, Tallwell, and I felt like they were laughing at me, and I left that meeting, and it was one boardroom too many. I got home and I got into bed, and I didn't actually get out for 3 weeks. I just gave in. I was absolutely broken. And then with that, obviously, I went to the doctors, and he said to me, you've had a mental breakdown, you've got anxiety and depression. And I said, look, I've been around people. It's more than that. What has caused it? How could I be absolutely the strongest person and resilient at 40? Even my colleagues were going, Adelle, it's not like you. You don't normally do this. And I couldn't. I felt so embarrassed. And 10 years ago, nobody would talk about mental health at all. So I spoke to my doctor, and he said, take antidepressants. And I said, but for me, we're not actually explaining. I don't understand. I don't mind taking something if I know why. And he said, look, you're not going to get any better without taking them. So I took a couple. And the funny thing, I was like, oh, the hot flushes have stopped. The hot feeling had stopped. So I, as Adelle does, got out all the leaflets and started to look at researches, and they were saying that they would use these for hot flushes in menopausal women. And I thought, maybe. When I sort of sat with the doctor, and he said, well, what about these symptoms? Is that worked? And we said, yes. He said, okay, let's run eventually, because I was only 40. They wouldn't then run any of the bloods. They run them all. And he went, oh, he said, you are post-menopausal. The pressure that I was under in that year had basically sped the cycle up so rapidly. That's why I felt a very quick rush of them. And I said to him, so what do I do now then? How am I going to cope with the mental fatigue, the anxiety and the depression? And he said, perhaps you should consider leaving and getting a less stressful job. And with that, I just burst into tears with absolute frustration. I'm thinking, so I've spent the last 40 years, and you're sitting here now at the height of my career telling me I've got to choose between my body and my business. He said, or stay on antidepressants. I said, but we now know I'm actually not depressed. I will get waves of depression and anxiety because of this, but I can't have it as a solution. So I had an amazing employer that they recognised then that perhaps, we could have looked out for me a little bit more. But to be fair, I never told anybody I was suffering. So I can't blame my workplace, because I never shared how I was feeling. So there is a responsibility. So I had a 3-month sabbatical and decided to go away and really understand what a woman's body goes through. And there was so little information out. And when I spoke to women at the time, they were quite reluctant to talk about it. So I then created some working groups, and I eventually got myself back to fitness. And I didn't actually go back to corporate finance. I went back to HR, so I could write the policies, set up the menopause groups, and support with mental health and menopause. So that's what happened. But I had never been so scared and so lonely and so frustrated, and couldn't even if I'd broken my arm, people could see, you could explain. But when it is in your head and even you don't understand, it's really hard. So yeah, it was a really tough time for me.
Oh my gosh, yes. And thank goodness you figured this out for yourself. And you've been able to get yourself back and then some, clearly. But the process of getting there, you had to figure it out. No one figured it out for you. And the confusion that you felt, and that many women feel around this sort of stuff. And Sandy had talked about being able to relate to this in, for a variety of reasons, being able to relate to these issues. And oh my gosh, the this is no joke. Menopause is no joke. Perimenopause is no joke. The anxiety is a physiological process. The
Mm,
depression is a physiological process. So it can be misdiagnosed. You can be put on the wrong medication. You're not really treating the source. So,
mm,
you mentioned how, in essence, that you were going through this really very much alone. And when we think about how there are certain milestones in people's lives, and we'll talk about women's lives because that's what we're doing here today, um, that people celebrate. One gets pregnant, and there's showers, and there's all this celebration, and this other on the other end of things, the other end of
mm,
this reproductive cycle, this thing happens. People don't talk about it. It's all maligned. It's all like, oh, I have God, it's this horrible thing. And there
mm.
are wonderful things that can come out of it, which we'll get to shortly. But boy, knowing what you're dealing with is so important. And it sounds like that's a lot of what you've been doing.
Absolutely, it is, and you're right. And at the time when I was going through it at 40, when the doctor just said menopause, I looked at him and I thought that's something that my grandmother would have gone through,
What
and
old ladies do.
it's what ladies do. And if you then sort of Google or you put the images in, you're like, that's not me. So and there was a lot of grieving. I did actually go through that grieving process, because there's one thing, you choose not to have any more children, but when Mother Nature tells you you can't, then you feel like your choices have gone. So there's that first element. And then I noticed what Sandy put here about body image. My body was changing. And then I felt like the texture, I felt like my hair was changing. I was then suffering with a couple of intolerances that I hadn't had until I was a teenager. And then I got teenager sort of spots again. And but you have all that teenager-ism, but you're running companies and you've got your own family. And then your children are going, are you okay, Mum? You're like, no. So there was a lot of grieving. And then I realised is that I can't be the only one. So, and as I always say, you got to be the change you want to see in the world. So I could have so easily, I thought, no, I'm going to talk to other women and ask them sort of how they sort of feel. So when I did actually go back to work, people said to me, so what are you going to say you took time off to do? And I said, I'm going to go away and say I took time off to understand mental health and menopause and why I had a mental and physical breakdown. And I will explain that to people. And they went, oh, wouldn't it be better to say, I said, yeah, no, I'm going to be really, really honest. And the thing is, and when I went back to HR, you have to tick a box as to why you was absent from work. There was no, in those days, there was no absence box for mental health or for menopause. So I then started to put that together. And then when I came out and talked about my story, I was in a senior position, so I felt I had that responsibility. And the amount of women who privately came to me and said, Adelle, that's how I felt. That's how I felt. So we put some private cafes together in work, and I put some groups together, and we was able to share how we felt. And what we were saying is and this is when it really hit home to me, we are the first generation of women to work through our menopause, because traditionally my mum was at home and my grandmother was at home. And this is why I call it that it truly was the clash of the titans. So my career curve was doing this at 40. And then what I then realised is my hormones started to decline. But what I now know, they talk about hormone decline. They don't just decline. The gap between progesterone and estrogen breaks, the equilibrium, and it's that break point particularly that can impact the mood and depression. And then as the estrogen, she is our queen and our protector. That's how I call her. I had to desensitize it and realize it's not personal. It happens to all women. So when you look at it as a scientific part of the way your body, and then that way I was able to understand how estrogen is actually, if you do a scan from your head to your toe, she is all over you. So there's no doubt that this is a tough journey. And then when we add our lifestyle and our pressures, we can make that journey, which I realized I was making that whole transition much more uncomfortable. When I learned and understood how my body was changing, I made changes in my lifestyle so I could surf this change rather than having it as a tsunami, which is what happened to me in 1 year.
Mm-hmm. Right, because it can happen so quickly.
Yeah,
and
it did.
Yes,
It was so quick for me.
right. Women will feel like they are losing their minds. People around us will tell us we are losing our minds. Moods go up and down. There's anger, there's depression, there's off the charts anxiety. I remember when I hit perimenopause, my anxiety was huge, and I hadn't really been an anxious person. I couldn't figure out what was going on. But what the heck? Why am I feeling this way? And come to find out, it's when your FSH is, you're trying to kick out an egg and there just isn't one to be had. And so our body does this compensatory thing. But if nobody tells us that, we're treating the wrong thing. So I really try to be much more sensitive about that when I have women come in. So Adelle, you have identified, you have researched and identified 40 changes that women go through physically and mentally when we're going through perimenopause and menopause. Can you tell us some of those 40 changes? And as you said, you had to adjust your lifestyle.
Absolutely.
Accommodate that. 40 changes, and there's probably more. That's what you were able to discover. So 40 is a lot.
Absolutely. So it's really interesting. So when women say to me, oh, Adelle, I didn't have a hot flush, so I didn't go through it. So I do say to women, it's more than hot flushes, mood swings, and sleepless nights. There are lots of others. And the way I look at it is you get the mood element. So you get the anxiety, lack of confidence, and depression. And then you also get hot flushes, cold flushes, electric shocks. I had terrible electric shocks. So they're sort of the physical. But the ones that worry me the most that women have a lack of understanding is the brain health. There is also the muscle loss and osteoporosis in our density. And that truly is that structure, that absolute frame of how we have to live. And I look at, so when women say, and this is interesting, I did a talk yesterday and I say, this is where you have to look after your future self. Because today you may go, do you know what? I've got over the hot flush. Yes, I've had a mood swing, but I'm okay. But the degeneration when estrogen goes for those is important. So if I don't want to get up and do that strength training, I think of myself and I have a choice at the age of 80. Do I want to be on a beach with my surfboard doing a yoga class, or do I potentially want to be in a care home like lots of other women who do not realise osteoporosis is there until they actually have a fall and a fracture? So what happened to me and how I really understood the deeper, under the iceberg, the way I look at it, all of these symptoms under the iceberg. So above and below, you've got the 40. I was a marathon runner, as I said, and I had a niggle and a hip injury. So when I went into the scan, they said to me, the reason why you've got that injury is the bone density in your hips from years and years of running as a gymnast. So I had very mobile joints. And he said to me, but the discussion I want is your overall bone density and muscle loss. How long have you been postmenopausal? I said, actually 5 years. He said to me, if you don't really focus on these inner elements of you, that was when I added the rest of the 40. It took me 5 years to unpick them all, that I realized actually I had lost so much. And I had a hormone discussion with my hip surgeon that I would never have thought of. I was really scared. And that is again, so I worked with my hip surgeon. He said, well, you need to do strength training and excellence. So I literally was off my feet for 2 years. And so I was on a rowing machine. And then I love experimenting. I'm so geeky. So I literally followed a bodybuilding. So I'm a bit of a researcher. If you're going to follow a bodybuilder, you go to Arnie. Yeah, I went to Arnold. I download everything because I'm back to basics. And I followed a 2-year diet program, building up my body, and my surgeon said, I wish all my hip patients were like you. And I added density and the shoulders and the frame, because he said if I didn't, I would have had to have my hips replaced by the age I was 50, and I was 50 last year, and I said there's no way that is going to happen. So I've been educating around my 4 S's, which is strength training, which is steps and not hours and hours of jogging, because women think jogging it's going to help, because we get worry about our bellies, because we go from pair to square. So the first thing we do is we have to run a marathon, because that's what we think we have to do. I did that and it didn't work. And then stretching and conditioning, the amount of women that don't always, we do a yoga class once or twice a week, but do we really stretch every day? And then the last one is a shimmy. It's that really good feeling, and I call it the 4 S's. And women say to me, is that it? And I said, it's about simple, consistent steps. And for me, working on that strength training, and then my food. And do you know what? I threw away the scales, and I didn't realize how many years I'd been obsessed with diets. And I just felt completely liberated that I was going to eat to perform. I was going to eat to look after my body. And the only thing I look after is my waist, to make sure that I'm just getting stronger and stronger. And the true magic for me, which is what I realized, is sleep. And that is the difference. So when women say to me, well, I've always done this, the more we sleep during this process, and we are physically changing, then that for me. So when I look at what do I do different, it's food, move and snooze. I keep it really simple for my clients.
Food, move and snooze. Well,
yep. We food, we move, and we snooze.
I like that. That's great.
And the reason why I build in snooze and calm is I've done a huge amount of research on the damage that cortisol does to a menopausal body. And by having that elevated, any person's body, we know now through lots and lots of research, but during this change period for us, the cortisol levels can be really exacerbate the fluctuations. It can really turn it. So when I talk to women about keeping calm, that means not putting in or putting themselves into undue stress situation. Because just when we wake up in the morning, if we do a scale from 1 to 10, just the whole process of menopause is +2. So when you get up in the morning, you're already vibrating at +2. If you then get up late, start screaming at the children, I know you're faulty. We are fault to ourselves, though, aren't we? We're just topping it up, right. From that point of view. So we focus on, now the interesting is, it's not being, we still need tension. We have to have a tension body to grow. So we can't stay in our comfort zone, because that's not good either. So I say to my clients, this is about having tension, not stress, because when we step into stress, that's when we trigger all of those symptoms. But we need that tension to carry on building our strength and our brain health as well. So and that is what I've been able to carry on researching myself for 11 years. And then obviously all the women that I've worked with, I've kept them in the boardroom, basically. So I've kept them in the boardroom on most days, being really strong and really powerful. And then I work with business women who, if they don't show up, there's no one always, they're in small entrepreneurs. There's not an army of people. But staggeringly, 51% of women take time out and lose clients and money. And 32% of women sell their entrepreneurial businesses because of this.
32% of women sell their business. And excuse me for a second, I fell. Thank you. And I like the midlife. We'll give you copyright. So 32% of women sell their businesses at this juncture.
Absolutely.
So, because it's so difficult for them to navigate.
Fatigue, brain fog, absolutely, tiredness. And it's really interesting as well. And what I've been able to study is also, I call it the social construct, that women are having children later in life. That even when I had my daughter at 27. So some women are choosing to build career and business, having their children later. So they're having children and going straight into menopause or So it's a real challenge. And so therefore you've got all of the postnatal depression, and then you can have that as well with children, or and even if you start that decline and then you're in your late 40s, you've got younger children, and we've just come through a year of homeschooling, so there's some real challenges. And I've talked to women and working with women to say, actually, strong body, strong business is where I focus them, and say, no, you shouldn't have to sell. There is a way of navigating this. So I always start with the first thing as why their body is changing. And then they go, it's not me, no. So then, and that's when we work through actually the food, the move, the snooze, the calm, all the things in my midlife resilience system. And I give them all the tools. But the first thing you have to do is explain to women what's going on. They said to me, why wasn't I told this in school?
Or even at the doctor's office, quite frankly.
Exactly.
Even at the doctor's office, even at the OB-GYN's office.
Yep.
Why am I not told these things? Which that's a whole nother conversation.
Yes.
I mean, thank goodness you are telling people, right? And the person who actually diagnosed what was going on with me was a fabulous nutritionist by the name of Valerie Early. Was not, it wasn't my OB-GYN who I'd gone to several times saying, what is happening here? So thank goodness you're doing this.
That's an absolute trend. So again, when women do come and talk, it is. It's your nutritionist, it's your coach, it's your girlfriends, because they've got a coach, or your nutritionist, or they're starting to talk to personal trainers. You're absolutely right. It's not who you would expect it to be.
Right. So if someone wanted to work with you, Adelle, because, my goodness, people need to be able to navigate this. There are so many responsibilities, especially right now, that women have, whether they're living alone and trying to navigate getting through COVID and social isolation that way, or if they're dealing with their family, or they're trying to now do their high-powered job over Zoom, whatever the case may be. And that's just right now. Then there's, ongoingly. How can someone work with you? Where would you begin with them? I mean, you talk about the food, move, and snooze and calm. So obviously you're educating them. How would they connect with you, and what would you do with them and for them?
Absolutely. So the first thing I do when I meet a new client, so I have a complimentary call with everybody before I start coaching, because sometimes I can give them some ideas, and I get every woman to complete an assessment. So they will literally tick off, because a lot of people do not realise there are some symptoms that they've got that would never associate. So I give them the 40 questionnaire, and then when I get the results, then I'm able to help and talk them through. And I do give, at the end of every one of those complimentary sessions, I give women, a fact sheet of where to start. And then I say to them, and then if you then want to become part of my program, and I don't offer, people say to me, is it an 8-week program? I said, I wish menopause was an 8-week program, but it's not. So what I do is I offer a community, and I've got an app and a group of women where I come through and I share all the training. But not only am I there, we're actually a community of women. So they do often share. If someone's not having a good day, they will post and somebody else will watch out for them. So we are a community of women, because that wasn't there for me. So from that point of view, that's what I've got. And then alongside the community, then I will take them through the midlife resilience system. And then every woman will get a coaching plan, but it's based on their needs, because everybody is so different. So everybody gets their own prescription, and then I'm a bit of a tough coach, because I will give you 5, I give you a few minutes, we'll talk about how bad it is, go, right, we're moving to action, ladies, and then we will go forward, because I will not let it define me, and I will not let it define my clients. And I've got clients that have changed their businesses, they've left their corporate careers, and to be fair, the best testimonials I get is, I was on a Zoom call because I work with women all around the world. One of the husbands popped his head around and went, I've just got to say, Adelle, thank you for getting my wife back. And by the way, how come her shoulders are bigger than mine now? I went, And I've had sons as well.
Would you like to sign up?
Yeah, I do you want to do our training? And he said, well, actually, I share the gym and the dumbbells with my wife when we're training together.
Nice.
But he said it was quite funny, and even sons as well. I said, I've got my mum back. So yeah, it's just not about it. It's the impact on you, your family, and your workplace. But yeah, so I've got a framework which all women follow, but some women will suffer in different areas more than others. So I will then work on a bespoke prescription and support those women.
That's great. So it's identifying the issue, really honing in on what the specific issue is for that woman, also offering community, which is so absent. We don't have menopause communities. There used to be these ceremonies for the crones, when we crossed over into that doesn't, I mean, maybe it happens somewhere. It doesn't happen here very often. It perhaps doesn't happen there, but having a community of women and then also having a plan. Right? Yeah. First you do this, then you do that, and I'm going to help hold you to it because your life will be better. You're not going to want to do some of these things. Nobody wants to do these things, but you do not want to be the woman in the care home because you can't push yourself up out of a chair, which is the number one reason, in addition to falls, that women end up in care homes. You don't want to be that woman who has to sell her job or sell her workplace, sell her business. You want to be the woman who can survive this and thrive. And that's really where you come in, Adelle. So there's so much more we could talk about. I would love to have you back at some point. This is fabulous. Thank you for joining us today. Amy, thank you for talking about the fact that social worth as a woman is challenged at this time. It is, for sure. This is a really challenging time. We really appreciate all of you being here with us today, Adelle. Thank you so much for coming. These half hours just fly by. I feel like we just scratched the surface. Perhaps you can come back sometime and we can talk more in depth. So if you're interested, please connect with Adelle at executivemidlife.coach. I'm Dr. Margot Jacot, owner and director of the Juniper Center. If you want to connect with us, you can find us at thejunipercenter.com. We definitely have so many folks that we're working with who we try to be mindful of this too, making sure that we're helping people catch and find out what's actually going on and sending them to people like Adelle who can help them properly. So Adelle, thank you. All the best to you. All the best to everyone. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. To those of you who are celebrating, happy Easter, happy Passover. If you've been celebrating that, if you're celebrating none of the above, just a peaceful week to all. Be well.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.